Here's your money briefing for Monday, April 17th. I'm J.R. Whalen for the Wall Street Journal. Millennials have faced economic challenges since many of them began their careers during the 2008 financial crisis. But now the group born between 1980 and the early 2000s is falling deeper into debt at a faster rate than any other segment. We'll talk to a 31-year-old mother of two struggling to make ends meet in a moment. But first, WSJ reporter Gina Heeb joins us. Gina, thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So Gina, a lot of people across age groups have racked up debt as we've emerged from the pandemic. But how bad has it gotten for millennials?
So Americans in their 30s have taken on debt at a really remarkable pace since the pandemic. Their total balances rose to more than $3.8 trillion in the fourth quarter, which is a 27% jump from 3 years ago before the pandemic. It's also the fastest pace of debt accumulation over a 3-year period since the Fed started this survey in 1999. That's excluding the financial crisis, of course, in which a housing bubble drove those numbers to something like 40%.
But still, that's an enormous ramp up.
Right. It's a pretty stunning trend we're seeing.
So how does their debt profile compare to other age groups?
The rate at which Americans in their 30s are taking on debt is higher than any other generation. For example, the average credit card balance for millennials rose to about $6,750 in January, a 26% rise from 2019 levels. Balances didn't really change for Gen X, and for older generations, they actually fell between 11 and 15%. So you can see it's a pretty stark contrast.
How did millennials get themselves into this really tough debt situation?
So what we saw over the pandemic is that households in general did better than people expected in 2020. They were stuck at home because of lockdown, they were receiving stimulus payments, and they were able to pay down some debt. But those benefits are over. The economy's reopened and people are back to traveling and commuting, and those stimulus payments have ended. And they've ended at a kind of a tough moment for the economy. Inflation pressuring people's budgets, and the last round of stimulus checks went out in 2021. And millennials are getting hit the hardest in some ways. Many spent thousands of dollars on unplanned childcare costs when schools were closed, and some relied heavily on a pandemic-era child tax credit program that stopped. And a lot are trying to buy homes.
Stacey Coquelin is among millennials facing this uphill battle. She's 31, has 2 children, and lives just outside of Miami. She was saving money to buy a home before the pandemic. Stacey, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Stacey, what do your personal finances and your debt in particular look like now compared to, say, the start of the pandemic?
Before the pandemic, I didn't really have any debt and I had less credit cards. And then from the start of the pandemic and then to now, I've gotten like 3 more credit cards and now they're all pretty much maxed out. I have been able to tackle 2 of them this year and get them totally at a 0 balance, which is great. It just takes a lot of dedication. You just got to live off of nothing and just get it done.
So how are things going now? How are you trying to manage your debt? And do you see some sort of path to relief from that debt?
Right now, I've cut out eating out. I don't go out anymore. I don't buy anything that I don't need. I live like I have absolutely nothing. Like I can go and spend money if I really wanted to, but that extra money that I don't need to be spending, I'm just throwing it at the debt. I did the snowball effect with my credit cards. So I paid the lowest amount, got that done, went to the second one, and just kept going. I'm keeping that transition and going that way.
Sounds like a series of small battles.
Yeah, you feel good, and then your determination gets even more and more because you actually see progress and you're doing it. So it's good.
How has this increase in debt changed the way you spend?
Before the pandemic, both my kids were in sports. My daughter did swimming for a while, and they both did flag football. And my son is always in an aftercare program at school. And even before the pandemic, it was about $170 a month. And now after I pay a little over $200 a month. So you can see how much it really has changed. Before the pandemic, things were a lot cheaper. You go to a store and you have a full cart and, it'll be like a little under $100. Now, forget it. After the pandemic, it's close to $200, $300. Just for 2 shampoos, I took my daughter. She got 2 shampoos and a body wash and a deodorant, and I spent $40. And it's just basic stuff, nothing crazy. It's crazy.
All right, that's Miami area resident Stacey Coquelin. Stacey, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, Gina, let's look long-term here. What does this debt picture look like for millennials going forward?
So there was already a really significant and growing wealth gap between millennials and other generations before the pandemic. And this rapid buildup that we've seen the past few years could actually worsen that trend. It's really important for people of prime working age to feel like they're on good financial footing because it empowers them to take risks that can power the broader economy. So that includes things like starting a new business or investing. But for millennials in their 30s, they haven't been feeling that way. They weren't before the pandemic, and they certainly aren't now. We know that this group has much lower rates of home ownership than other generations, and that's the main way that we build wealth in this country. And a lot of millennials feel like that's out of reach for them. Like we saw with Stacey, the housing boom that we saw over the pandemic really drove up prices as well as mortgage rates, and it's made monthly payments unaffordable for a lot of people in this group.
So this current experience they're going through can have a lasting effect.
Exactly.
All right, that's Wall Street Journal reporter Gina Heeb with us. Gina, thank you very much for being with us on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, JR.
And that's your Money Briefing. I'm JR Whalen for the Wall Street Journal.